Look at the man in the mirror. He carries scars, he carries shame, and he carries the psychological residue of every single time the world proved your kindness was a weakness. That man is running on empty, defined by the failure he endured. But listen closely, because today we perform a surgical, irreversible psychological operation. Your worst pain is not a memory to be healed. It is a concentrated, volatile fuel source that the weak leave on the ground. Today we become the alchemist, transforming that self-pity into pure, relentless power. This is the only path to becoming 10 times stronger, 10 times more focused, and fundamentally unbreakable. If you want to stop bleeding and start forging armor, then step into the fire. Architects of a self-made destiny, cast your gaze not at the future, but at the very foundations of your past suffering. The devastating betrayals, the crushing, public failures, the humiliations that nearly succeeded in shattering your will. For too long, you have succumbed to the comforting narrative, treating these deep, structural scars as non-negotiable evidence of your fundamental weakness, as tragic reasons to perpetually retreat into low-value victimhood, or as grievous open wounds that passively demand the soft balm of time and external comfort to slowly, uncertainly heal. The predictable world, with its sentimental demands, fully expects you to mourn your losses. Society, in its crippling softness, mandates that you waste energy seeking comfortable closure, and weakness, the parasite, begs you to succumb to the cheap, fleeting relief of complaining and self-pity. But understand this now, today, decisively, that pathetic era of self-pity and paralysis ends forever. Today, we irrevocably reject the debilitating narrative of the victim and fully embrace the ruthless, unsentimental mindset of the alchemist. The alchemist, in his profound wisdom, does not discard the inert, low-value lead. He subjects it to the intense, purifying pressure of extreme fire to produce gold. He does not fear the intense heat of the forge. He commands, controls, and utilizes it as his primary tool. Your pain is not, and never was, divine punishment. It is, in reality, the raw, highly concentrated, high-octane fuel required to power your ultimate, necessary transformation. It is the single most valuable, non-renewable resource you possess, and until this moment, you have been tragically wasting its enormous potential. Machiavelli, the master cartographer of power and strategic maneuvering, understood this eternal truth with chilling clarity, advising his readers to never waste the opportunity offered by a good crisis. Crisis, humiliation, and deep existential suffering are not passive obstacles to be avoided. They are strategically delivered gifts, showing you with absolute clarity exactly where your internal defenses failed and revealing the precise, detailed blueprints for your future, unbreakable strength. Today, we execute the alchemist's betrayal, the calculated, clinical, and total transformation of suffering into raw, quantifiable, and deployable power, a process guaranteed to make you 10 times more strategically lethal, 10 times more focused on your purpose, and fundamentally more dominant than the weak man you were before the wound was inflicted. We will dissect the 5 immutable laws of emotional transmutation that turn your worst, most painful moments into the very genesis of your God-level aura. Before we ignite this internal, necessary forge, you must fully internalize the true, unacceptable cost of remaining weak and seal this unyielding, final vow in the comments below. My pain is my weapon. The first law, the rejection of fairness, the first, most foundational and strategically essential law of emotional transmutation is the rejection of fairness, which is achieved by embracing the unblinking calculus of reality. The weakest men and women are psychologically trapped by the perpetual, debilitating, and entirely irrational expectation that life, in its indifferent cruelty, should somehow be fair to them, that their inherent goodness entitles them to an automatic shield against misfortune. and that any betrayal or injustice should be followed by a neat, comforting cosmic balance or a tidy justice system intervention. They waste their finite, non-renewable energy demanding emotional apologies, endlessly explaining their virtue to those who don't care, and passively waiting for the universe or some external force to compensate them for their suffering. This is the ultimate, crippling addiction to victimhood, and it is a guaranteed source of complete paralysis. Pain only retains its corrosive, debilitating power over you when you persist in the self-defeating belief that you were unfairly singled out or targeted. The Alchemist operates with the cold, clear knowledge that fairness is a psychological myth, and justice is a temporary, man-made construct that must be enforced by action, not passively expected. The decisive moment you stop asking the weak man's lament, "Why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this?" and instead immediately ask the sovereign's question, "What profound, hidden advantage has this event irrevocably given me?" The psychological handcuffs of victimhood instantly dissolve into dust. The alchemist views betrayal or injustice not as a moral failing of the universe or a personal tragedy, but as high-value, empirical, and absolutely non-transferable data on the cold, transactional nature of human behavior and the critical failure points of his own past judgment. You must treat every instance of profound pain, whether it's sudden financial ruin, public betrayal, or crushing personal heartbreak, not as a personal tragedy deserving of tears, but as a rigorous, unemotional case study. The hard data, once stripped of emotion, reveals two essential actionable truths: the fundamental, exploitable nature of the opponent and the inherent structural weakness of your past strategy. Machiavelli would demand that you strip all sentimental emotion from the event and analytically dissect the means, the methods, and the true motive of the person or force that inflicted the pain. Their strategy, no matter how base or low effort, instantly becomes an invaluable lesson in how to successfully avoid being conquered or exploited again. The rejection of fairness is the definitive, foundational act of sovereignty. It means you absolutely cease allowing unpredictable external events to unilaterally define or hijack your internal emotional state. The world is structurally indifferent, and the powerful man embraces that profound, liberating indifference. Your pain transforms from a source of lamentation into a high-priced tuition fee paid for a brutally necessary lesson that the weak are too sentimental and too paralyzed to ever truly learn. The only reliable law in existence is the one you enforce yourself through power and consequence. You must immediately stop chasing the low-value comfort of passive closure and begin the relentless, high-value pursuit of the cold, hard certainty of total control. This is the first betrayal, the betrayal of your own sentimental expectations. The second law, the isolation of the wound. The second law of transmutation is the isolation of the wound, the execution of surgical detachment. When the unmastered are profoundly hurt, they allow the pain to become a systemic, highly contagious infection, spreading its paralyzing poison indiscriminately to every single area of their life. A professional failure contaminates and destroys their personal relationships. A personal betrayal paralyzes their professional ambition. Their entire sense of identity collapses into the singular, overwhelming, and debilitating narrative of their suffering. The alchemist, however, treats profound pain as a localized, contained, and easily manageable phenomenon. He recognizes with absolute clarity that the intense energy of the original, singular event is far less dangerous in the long term than the spreading, corrosive infection of emotional generalization and self-pity. Surgical detachment means you must physically, mentally, and emotionally isolate the wound. You must consciously observe the pain, acknowledge its measured severity, but you must simultaneously refuse its mandate to dictate or control your focus, interrupt your non-negotiable routine, or derail your forward momentum. This disciplined isolation is the ultimate act of emotional discipline and strategic self-containment. When the memory of the betrayal surfaces with its familiar sting, you allow yourself a strictly timed, controlled, and brief moment to analytically dissect the data. But you immediately, ruthlessly, and without self-negotiation, redirect 99% of your remaining energy back to your most demanding, most important, and most self-elevating task, your singular purpose. The wound is ruthlessly contained to a brief, analytical session, not permitted to become a continuous, draining, 24-hour public broadcast. This disciplined isolation achieves two critical, compounding results. First, it denies the attacker further, sustained energy. When the person who originally hurt you realizes with dawning frustration that their actions did not successfully stop your forward progress, did not derail your financial or professional purpose, and did not render you emotionally weak, but instead simply became a temporary, irrelevant historical footnote, they instantly lose their final, crucial shred of power and leverage over you. Your unyielding indifference to their intended destructive impact is their ultimate psychological defeat. Second, it precisely channels the destructive volatile force. By surgically isolating the pain, you successfully compress its massive, volatile, and intense negative energy into a singular, highly focused, usable stream. This compressed, high-pressure energy, the intense drive for never again, the white-hot, paralyzing shame of being briefly vulnerable, the raw, primal desire for long-term structural repayment, must be immediately and totally redirected into the most demanding, self-fortifying activities: intense physical training, complex intellectual study, or the relentless pursuit of financial and territorial sovereignty. The isolation of the wound is the creation of a massive, strategic pressure cooker, ensuring that not a single drop of that powerful negative energy is wasted on low-value emotional outbursts, social signaling, or futile, time-consuming complaints. The pain becomes the constant, internal, silent pressure driving your discipline. The third law, the transmutation of shame. The third law is the final, alchemical, and most crucial step: the transmutation of shame, creating weaponized discipline. Every profound betrayal, every public failure, or every humiliating setback leaves behind an insidious, sticky psychological residue: shame. Shame is the psychological anchor that attempts to chain your present self to the debilitating identity of the person who was broken and exploited. It whispers constantly that you deserved the pain, that you were fundamentally and structurally foolish, and that you must now hide your damaged, unworthy self from the world's harsh judgment. The unmastered internalize this shame as absolute truth and turn it into paralyzing self-loathing and total inaction. The alchemist performs the most ruthless, self-serving transmutation of all. He clinically takes the shame, the bitter, intense, unforgettable humiliation of being briefly exposed as vulnerable, and converts its entire destructive force into uncompromising, relentless, self-enforced discipline. This elevated state of operation is not fueled by fragile, temporary hope. This is disciplined action fueled by the absolute, paralyzing terror of ever feeling that specific, humiliating vulnerability again. Your worst, most agonizing feeling becomes your non-negotiable, unyielding standard. Every single time the voice of shame attempts to resurface in your mind, you do not waste energy arguing with it. You simply move. You do not pause to justify. You immediately and decisively act. The moment you feel the residual internal sting of that past humiliation, you must immediately force yourself into the highest effort, most demanding task available. An extra hour of concentrated work, an extra set in the gym, an extra layer of structural planning for your purpose. This weaponized discipline serves as the external, irrefutable proof that the pain did not successfully break you. It strategically sharpened and refined you. The humiliation of the past now actively enforces the non-negotiable excellence of your present actions. Machiavelli constantly emphasized that the appearance of strength is as crucial, if not more crucial, than strength itself, and nothing projects this terrifying, absolute strength more effectively than a discipline so total, so consistent, and so self-enforced that it seems entirely effortless. The world sees the sudden, dramatic results, the 10 times focus, the unbreakable routine, the sudden, terrifying efficiency, and they inevitably conclude you are operating with inhuman, unassailable willpower. They do not and cannot realize that your indomitable willpower is merely the pressurized, carefully refined byproduct of your past shame, chemically converted into a perfect, lethal tool of self-mastery. You have successfully taken the one psychological force intended to utterly destroy you and turned it into the immutable, unstoppable engine of your ascent and dominance. This transmutation of shame is the birth of awe. The fourth law, the architecture of consequence. The fourth law of the Alchemist is the architecture of consequence, establishing the final inversion of expectation. The common man expects their pain to simply fade over time. They expect their attacker to eventually feel remorse or face immediate retribution. They expect life to eventually reward their silent suffering with comfort. The alchemist knows that suffering without a defined structural and strategic consequence is merely wasted, unutilized energy. The architecture of consequence is the ruthless, long-term, and total commitment to ensuring that the fact of your suffering serves a demonstrable, powerful, and quantifiable purpose in the world. This is not about seeking childish, petty revenge that requires emotional expenditure. It is about enacting structural repayment and systemic rebalancing. If you suffered a profound financial betrayal, the consequence is that your new systems, your new knowledge, and your new discipline will guarantee you achieve a level of financial sovereignty and dominance that renders the attacker's current resources entirely pathetic and irrelevant. If you suffered a public or professional betrayal, the consequence is that your laser-like focus will elevate you to a position of such undeniable authority that you unilaterally determine the attacker's professional fate and future access. This inversion of expectation is the ultimate act of psychological defiance against the weak world's predictable script. You strategically deny the attacker the final, satisfying curtain call of seeing you broken and instead force them to become unwilling, anxious witnesses to your inevitable, exponential elevation, an elevation powered entirely by the immense negative energy they so foolishly and carelessly gave you. Your overwhelming success becomes the consequence itself. The world expects the injured party to retreat into self-imposed silence. You use the injury as the unassailable justification for your ruthless expansion and strategic dominance. This is the final, most devastating step in the alchemist's betrayal. You betray the universal, weak expectation of your own destruction and defeat. The suffering was merely a necessary catalyst, and the final, undeniable consequence is the unbreakable, sovereign, 10 times more powerful version of yourself that emerges from the fire. Your success must be so massive, so structurally self-evident, and so strategically undeniable that the trivial story of your pain is instantly and permanently overshadowed by the towering, undeniable legend of your rise. The cost of your pain is paid by the awe your power commands. The fifth law, the unveiling of the Golem. The fifth and final law is the unveiling of the Golem, the dramatic, irreversible birth of the unbreakable self. The alchemist's work is finished when the suffering has been fully consumed, neutralized, and structurally converted into permanent structural discipline. The original wound no longer exists as a source of pain. Only the impenetrable armor it rigorously forged remains. This golem is the man who is defined not by what hurt him, but by his absolute, structural, and unyielding response to the injury. He moves with the god-level aura because his absolute stillness is not merely practiced. It is the natural, default operational result of a mind that has nothing left to fear externally. His heavy silence is not merely strategic. It is the default, efficient state of a mind focused entirely on execution and analysis. The greatest non-transferable leverage the past pain gave you was the complete necessary destruction of your most toxic illusions, the illusion of fairness, the illusion of permanence in life, and the crippling illusion of inherent human goodness. The golem operates only on cold, verifiable facts and rigorous systems. He has achieved self-mastery not through comfortable, self-soothing meditation, but through the crucible of intense, existential fire and calculated self-betrayal. Your betrayal was merely the final ignition, and your self-discipline is the irreversible final result. Your unbreakable will is now a non-transferable core asset that no person, no betrayal, and no future crisis can ever possibly take away. You have faced the worst possible scenario in your life and strategically used its immense negative energy to fortify yourself against all future attempts at exploitation. The world will look at this new self and instantly perceive a force of terrifying, calculated, and absolute control. They will fear your silence, not your words, because they know instinctively that the man they thought they broke is now the unmoving, unassailable man who cannot be moved. This is the ultimate alchemist's betrayal. You betrayed the weak expectation of your own destruction, and you betrayed the paralyzing weakness of your former self. You traded temporary, debilitating emotional pain for permanent, exponential, and structural power. You owe nothing to the past but profound gratitude for the hard-won, high-value data. Your new purpose is to wield this sovereign power with the unyielding discipline of a true sovereign, ensuring that every move you make reinforces the terrifying, beautiful reality that your pain was, in the final analysis, the greatest strategic advantage you could have ever received. You are no longer the broken man. You are the weapon he successfully forged.